All right, everybody, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. It's Wednesday, it's noon. You're here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences YouTube channel. That means it's time for the Lunchtime Discovery Series. Good to be with you all again. As always, we've got a great show for you today. This program is brought to you by the folks at the North Carolina Office of Environmental Education. Lisa and Marty do a fantastic job of looking out into the world of science, nature, education, conservation, and more, and finding just the best people to come and be a part of this series, which has been going on for, well, a long time. There's quite an archive of guest speakers and their presentations that are here on our YouTube channel, but this program goes back even further than that. It's had many iterations, but always a fantastic way to hang out with colleagues and peers and hear from some people who are doing really interesting things out there in those worlds and disciplines, learn from them, and then find out ways that we can incorporate that into our lives and into our jobs, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. If you're a student, guess what? You're going to learn something new and interesting. Definitely something to write your next paper about. Probably even just today. I bet there's going to be some nugget that you could dive deep on. We're all going to leave having learned something new today, probably something about ourselves as well, if I know anything about today's guest speaker. So very excited for today's program because we have the inimitable Dr. Eleanor Spicer Rice. Dr. Eleanor Spicer Rice has written a number of books, famously is an entomologist and science writer, but now has a new book called Unseen Jungle: The Microbes That Secretly Control Our World, that is just out in the last couple of months, I believe. So very recent. And Eleanor joins us now. Hi, Eleanor.
Hey, how are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great. It's good to be with you again.
I'm really glad to be here. Are you ready for me to start?
I think we should jump into Unseen Jungle.
Let's jump in. Jump into nuggets.
I'm not sure what to expect with this one, but I'm excited for it.
We're gonna find out. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen and see how it rolls. Are you ready? All right, there we are. Okay, before we begin, like Chris said, I have a confession to make. But first, I want to say how excited I am to be here because I really love and believe in what North Carolina Environmental Education with Lisa and Marty is doing. And I love the Science Museum. And I think Chris is just absolutely fantastic. So I'm so thrilled to be back talking to the Lunchtime Discovery Series. I haven't been here in years. Okay, but this is my confession. As Chris said, I am not a microbiologist. We're going to talk about microbes today. But I was trained as, wait, this is not the thing that I need to be on. I have to do, this is like here, hold on, let's do this. Boop, boop. And then, where's the slideshow? Down here. There we go. Here we go. I was trained as an entomologist. So if you have specific microbe questions, I probably don't know the answer to them. I didn't know a lot about microbes before I started writing this book. But now that I know about them, I know that they are fascinating and they're running our whole planet in some very beautiful, sometimes very weird ways. So I'm going to talk about some of these microbes, but that I learned about from the book. But before I do, I want to talk about what a microbe is in case some of you are like I was when I started writing the book and I didn't know a whole lot about microbes. So microbe is any living thing that's too small to see with the naked eye. Most of us can't really see anything that is less than a little bit less than half the width of a human hair. So if you look down here, you can see that that includes tons of different types of living things. That includes most bacteria, many fungi, archaea, and more. Viruses are not technically alive because they don't eat, but they're counted as microbes by the American Society of Microbiology. So that's good enough for me. But some people will argue with you on that. So they're small, but they're really, really abundant and they're really, really influential on our planet. This is just a graphic that shows the masses of all the creatures combined on our planet. So if you look down here in the corner, you'll see this is gigatons, which is just a whole bunch, all the humans together, and you look at just the bacteria out of the microbes, you can see that the bacteria on Earth are more than 1,000 times more massive than the total weight of the humans on the planet. So that's pretty wonderful to think about, because they're everywhere. They operate at every single level of the environment, from making huge amounts of oxygen in our oceans to helping creatures digest cellulose, and which is the most abundant organic compound on the planet, and it's very, very hard to digest, to decomposing life that has since passed. If we killed them all of the microbes on the planet, the results would be pretty catastrophic. So I have this quote here from some researchers who examined the services and the roles of microbes on our planet, and then talked about what would happen if all the microbes were gone. So I'm just going to read you what's going to happen if we take away all of our microbes. So here's what they said. We predict a complete societal collapse within a year or so, linked to the catastrophic failure of food supply chain. Annihilation of most humans and non-microscopic life on the planet would follow a prolonged period of starvation, disease, unrest, civil war, anarchy, and global biogeochemical asphyxiation. In other words, we're done. We need our microbes. So even on, that's like very large scale, but on and in our bodies, they're doing really cool stuff. They are our first line of defense against disease just by taking up space. Look at your hands. They're covering all of your body on the outside, and they take up so much space that it's hard for invaders to get in. And then when invaders try to get in, some of them actively try to fight them off. And they do other stuff too. They make vitamins for us. They influence what we can eat. They influence what we crave to eat based on our microbiomes, how attractive we are to other people in some ways. Some species even produce neurotransmitters in our bodies, like dopamine and norepinephrine, that influence our moods. So dopamine is that feel-good, like pleasure neurotransmitter, and norepinephrine is associated with like the stress reactions. So they can actually stress us out, and they can actually calm us down inside our bodies, which is so wild to me. They're so abundant on our bodies that our most conservative estimates suggest that the human to microbe cell ratio on our body is 1-to-1. And if you scrape them all off of our body and all out of our body, and you put them in a sack, the sack would weigh up to 6 pounds and would be about the size of our brains. So it's a lot of our bodies is microbes. And that's all very large scale. What I want to talk about today is like some small scale. I want to tell you some of my favorite stories about microbes and the creatures that they love all around us. Well, not love, because, microbes, as far as we know, don't have the capacity to love or affection, but you know what I mean. So when we're thinking about microbes and how they influence behavior, it's important to consider why they might influence behavior to begin with. So this is just a picture of Svengali. He's a character from a novel that like controlled what this woman thought and, got her to do what he wanted. He's the original influencer. Okay. But you're thinking about how microbes are influencing behavior and why they might want to. Well, they're not like Svengali because they don't have a brain. They don't have ill will, and they don't really have goodwill. They don't have legs or wings even, or muscles, or most of them don't, or any way to deliberately travel great distances. But they still, except for viruses, need to eat. And they need to reproduce. And if that's going to happen, they're going to need some help. So what does have legs or arms or brains or wings or muscles or anything like that? Well, we do. And so do lots of other creatures and plants. And so microbes have evolved relationships with tons of different creatures and plants, and some are beneficial and some are not so beneficial. All right, so let's talk about the specifics of some of these relationships. I have divided this presentation. You might not can see it because of the little text box. I don't know. You can move it if you need to. Into completely unscientific ratings that I totally made up myself. So these ratings are only based on how weird I think that these interactions are. So they could be like beginner level weirdness, or intermediate, and then we're going to work on some advanced level weirdness. And all of these reactions are things that you can see or you somehow indirectly encounter in your daily life, if you know how to look for it or you know what you're doing. All right, let's start with our beginners. Invincible roaches, okay? The entomologist in me feels like it is very important that we know that there are more than 4,500 species of roaches on the planet. So 4,500 that we know about it. And most of them are absolutely wonderful because they live outside. They keep the ecosystems healthy by eating stuff that we can't eat, like dead leaves. They serve as food for lots of organisms. They're wonderful. I mean, look at this roach here. Look how beautiful it is. And beyond being beautiful, look, it's just minding its own business. It's not crawling across your porch or in your kitchen or whatever at night. It's just doing its own thing. But a few dozen species, just a few dozen out of 4,500 species are pests. And they're pests because they have co-evolved with humans and they depend on us and they eat the things that we don't want anymore. And sometimes the things that we leave out on the counter that we might have wanted, but we don't now that they've gotten it all gross. All roaches had started out as scavengers. Scavengers usually eat foods that are not very nutritious, that other things don't want to eat, right? So here is our roach. That was a wild roach scavenger before scavenging on that beautiful twig or whatever. Here is what we have done to roaches. He's eating an old banana peel right there, living his life. So roaches, because the food that they eat is usually pretty non-nutritious, they have got to have some help turning non-nutritious food into nutritious food. Enter microbes. This is a mama roach. Here she is. This is her egg purse right here called an ootheca, and it's filled with her little eggs that she'll drop when she lays them. Now, when the mama roach lays her eggs, she douses them with a bacteria called bladobacterium. This bacterium lives in the roach's fat cells. And what it does is it turns the food that most things can't eat into nutrients. Now, bladobacterium has lived inside roaches for more than 140 million years. This is long before humans showed up to hang out with some roaches. And it's long since lost the ability to live on its own. If it needs to survive, it needs to survive, and it needs the roaches to survive. So way that it does this is it takes the waste that roaches make from eating food, and it turns their own waste, which is uric acid. You know, when a bird poops, Chris, you ever seen a bird poop and there's like white in there? Or you look under a spider web and there's little white splotches? That's uric acid. Have you ever seen roach poop? It just looks like little tiny mouse poops. That's because there's no uric acid in it, because the bladobacterium takes their poop and turns it into food and gives it back to the roach. So it's really cool that they're able to do this, but this isn't the only thing. Without bladobacterium, the roaches would become malnourished. They wouldn't be able to survive. But this is not the only thing that roaches do with bacteria. They kick it up a notch by having gut bacteria that essentially makes them completely invincible, because their gut bacteria helps them to detoxify the things that could kill us. And it also can detoxify, for some roaches, insecticides. So they can eat insecticides and it's not going to do anything to them because their bodies are essentially totally immune to this stuff, which is pretty crazy. But it's not. Oh, there's the bladobacterium. Sorry, I didn't show you that. This looks like bacteria. There's a roach on a toothbrush, just in case you were feeling it. But anyway, it's not all bad for us, because right now, roaches, we know, can live in some of our most polluted environments on the planet. If we think about North Carolina and we think about like our hog operations, for example, one common practice for many hog growers, because they're growing so many creatures in a small space, is they regularly cover them with antibiotics. Roaches they thrive in hog farms, and they're constantly being covered with antibiotics. These farms are breeding antibiotic resistant bacteria, and the roaches are able to combat them with their bodies. So right now we are looking at roaches to help us to discover new antibiotics so that we can also compete in this race against bacteria and make life-saving drugs. So it's pretty cool that we always turn it around to be about us, but this is one case where it is. So well done, roaches. And this is a guy who made friends with roaches. I don't really recommend making friends with roaches like in your house, but you do you. But now we need to kick it up a notch and move it up to our intermediate level of microbe weirdness. I want to talk about zombie flies and undead babysitters. This is a case of zombies here. Let's start with somebody that we see all the time right now, especially the housefly. So the houseflies are everywhere. In my house, my children leave the doors open all day long and they come inside and try to move in with us. But houseflies are like roaches. They're born in things that we would consider filthy. They're able to thrive in them, and they're able to do that because of the bacteria that are living on and inside their bodies that detoxify this stuff that could kill us. But that is not what makes it an intermediate level. That's beginner stuff. We've moved up to the next level. So what makes this an intermediate level of microbe weirdness in my case, in my opinion, is that these flies are haunted by the idea that a fungus could come and kill them at any moment. They actually don't know about it, but this fungus haunts them. So here's what happens. The fungus is called Entomologist muscae. We're going to call it the fungus because it's so long to say it. But the fungus, one spore of the fungus will land on the fly, and it will drill through the fly's exoskeleton and pour its cells into the body of the fly. And the fly is like, cool, whatever, I don't know anything, I'm a fly. So all along, as a fungus grows and reproduces, it fills the body of the fly up with more fungal cells. And it eats the fly alive from the inside out, saving its vital organs for last so that the fly can keep on moving. When the fly is about to die, it can't survive anymore. The fungus goes into its brain and forces it to do its bidding. And if a fungus could talk, this is what the fungus would say. It says, here, fly, listen to me, buddy. You need to climb up high, preferably on top of some other flies, and stand there and grab on tight and spread your wings out like a big airplane. So the fly climbs up high because it's under the control of this fungus now. It grabs onto something tight and spreads out its wings. And once it does that, the fly dies and the fungus explodes out of its body and tumbles down the wings. And the wings act like a funnel in reverse, spreading the spread of the fungus. And it rains this deadly rain on the flies beneath it. And then this is the worst part of this. This fly has had a terrible life. So many indignities have already occurred to this fly, but the fungus isn't done with it yet. The fungus produces this smell that smells exactly like a female fly that is super receptive to males coming in to mate with them. And the males smell this super hot babe and they fly down to mate with it, the corpse of this fly, and they mate with the corpse and they infect themselves, and it keeps going on and on. Can you imagine? Like, it was just terrible. This poor is like necrophilia, and in addition to that, being a zombie before that. Okay, so everything is terrible, basically, is what I'm saying. And that's just why it's made it intermediate. Now, we've got to move on because we have another one that's a little bit weirder than this. And this is the undead babysitters. Here's another case of zombie makers, but this time it's not a fungus. Everybody loves ladybugs. I love ladybugs. They're cheerful. They will really brighten your day. They're really lucky, but they have some really horrible things that happen to them in your garden that you need to know about. Here's the thing about ladybugs. They're bright red, which in nature is a warning color. It says, stay away. Ladybugs are warning you that if you eat it, it's going to taste terrible. They are horrible tasting. Has anybody ever picked up a ladybug and had it, and people say, oh, it peed on me? You know, this little yellow stuff comes out. That's not pee, that's its chemical defenses that make it taste terrible. As we know now from roaches, their pee is white. So it's not pee, but it does smell bad. Now, the other thing about ladybugs is that they have very tough outer shells. So even if you did happen to like the taste of ladybugs, you're really having to crunch through a lot to get anything you want. They're basically like little tanks going through your garden, destroying all of your garden pests. They're great. We love them. Ladybugs don't love one wasp, though, that I need to tell you about. This is the wasp. It is a little orange and black wasp with green eyes. And you'll never guess what it's called. It's called the green-eyed wasp because entomologists are often not very creative. Well, here's what happens with the green-eyed wasp. It flies up to a ladybug. It reaches under that very tough outer shell called elytra that ladybugs have, their outer wings, and it stings the ladybug one time. In that sting, it injects one egg inside the ladybug. As with the fungus from the fly, this egg hatches and begins to eat the ladybug alive. So here's our little ladybug crawling along, not having any idea that something is eating it alive. It saves the vital organs for the end and just survives on the fat body and keeps moving around so the ladybug can keep its life. Because in this case, this baby wasp wants the ladybug to stay alive as long as possible because it has some really big horrors that are going to unfold as soon as it's ready to pupate. Now, a larvae of a wasp are like ants or butterflies. They have complete metamorphosis. So it goes from an egg to a little squishy larva. There's not like, if you don't see a baby wasp flying along, baby wasps look like maggots. They're very, very tender, would be a great juicy snack, even for a ladybug. And then they pupate, and then they emerge as adults. Now, the pupal form is the most dangerous form for any insect because it can't move once it's pupated. It's stuck there while it's turning into, an adult. And so also it's tasty. So anybody could come by and eat this baby wasp at any minute if it was just left in the open or in a little cocoon. So what the wasp does when it's almost ready to emerge from the back of the ladybug, here's the baby wasp. Oh, sorry, I'm just pointing. You can't see it. Here's the baby wasp right here, emerging from the bottom of the ladybug. And you see it doesn't look like it's mama yet. It releases a virus. And the virus goes up to this poor ladybug's brain and starts bashing around on its brain cells. The ladybug's response is to grab a branch really hard and start acting defensively like this and shaking and scaring everything away. So then the baby wasp climbs under the ladybug's legs and pupates under the legs. So the ladybug will grip onto this very thing that has been eating it alive for the last several weeks or days. And the ladybug grabs onto it and then defends it against anybody coming to try to eat it. And everybody stays away because, as we know, ladybugs don't taste very good, so they stay away from it. And then the wasp goes on to sting more ladybugs. The really sad part about this story to me is that a quarter of the ladybugs that are stung and eaten alive by these baby wasps, they recover from the virus. It's an infection. They recover from it, and then some of them get stung again, and then they have it happen to them all over again. This is their life. This is their story. It is very sad. All right, that's intermediate. Let's get advanced. Let's take it to the final level of advanced level weirdness. So these are some complicated codependent relationships and gene thieves. We'll start with the codependent relationships. So this is a nematode. A nematode's a worm-looking thing. This particular nematode is called Heterohabitus bacteriophora. Now, because of that, I'm just going to call it the nematode, so I don't have to say that every time because it's fewer syllables. But it's pretty nondescript looking. It's kind of boring. It's about as long as your fingernail is thick. It's very tiny, but it's not quite a microbe. You could see it with the naked eye. Now, these little guys swim through the dirt all over the world, including here, okay? And what they do is they hope that they'll cross paths with an insect and use that to make lots of babies. The thing is, compared to this nematode, an insect is ginormous. So how is he going to kill a whole insect? Well, this is where our microbes come in. These nematodes are stuffed with these bacteria called Photorhabditis luminescens. Because of that, we're going to call it the bacteria. Now, the bacteria needs somebody to carry it around and feed it. Well, the nematode is up for that. That's totally cool. The nematode needs somebody to help it take down giants. Well, this is the beginning of this beautiful friendship. of terror for bugs. This is where the relationship goes from intermediate to advanced. So the nematode's hanging out in the soil with his little head sticking up, waiting for an insect to come by. The insect comes by, the nematode launches out of the soil, gets in the insect and hacks in with its one little nematode tooth and moves on in and lives inside the insect. The first thing that it does when it gets in the insect is it starts barfing up this bacteria inside the insect. The bacteria releases a toxin that is so toxic that 10 bacterial cells can kill a whole insect in one day. Just 10 tiny little cells can kill the insect in one day. But this bacteria has a lot of things that it can do. So we'll keep moving. So there they are. The nematode and the bacteria are using this insect's body to reproduce and reproduce and reproduce to an extraordinary level. The insect is dead. Just to show you how much they reproduce, just look at all those nematodes if you cracked open one of these insect bodies. The thing is that a dead insect lying on the ground is pretty attractive to a lot of animals. Everybody loves insects. I mean, chipmunks love them, frogs love them, birds love them. This insect does not need to be eaten if these nematodes want to keep moving around in the soil, because they don't want to end up in the guts of any kind of animal. So the bacteria releases another suite of chemicals that does some pretty wild things to keep the insect from getting eaten. The first thing it does is release something that makes the bugs smell absolutely horrible. So the larger animals are totally going to stay away from it. Then it turns the bug a bright red color. Then, as we remember from ladybugs, you don't want to eat anything that's red. Just for those who don't smell things, you don't want to eat things. Then it releases a chemical that kills nematodes and deters other ants from coming in. And then it makes it glow. So it's able to cause these insects, which glowing in the insect world, we think is a way of advertising that you are not very tasty either. So here is a larva that has been infected with a nematode. You can see that it's red. Here's some poor little hornworms that are glowing from the bacteria. It's called the angel's glow, which they are with the angels now, so I can see why. But you can tell that it's done some really crazy stuff. And humans, as usual, have turned this to our advantage. And you can now buy these nematodes by the millions and spray them on your crops and wait for them to start barfing up into your insects all these weird bacteria, which is a thing that happens. Okay, this is the last microbe that I want to talk about. And it's about some gene thieves that we have going on here. This is the coffee. Oh, did I already say this, Chris? I'm not sure. But anytime you see these illustrations, they're from the guy who illustrated the book, whose name is Rob Wilson. And he's wonderful. But I wanted to did I say that already?
You hadn't, but I'm glad that you did.
Yeah, no, we know. Rob Wilson's wonderful. Okay, so these are, I'm talking about, thank you, Chris. These are gene thieves, okay? So we're talking about the coffee berry borer beetle, or the coffee beetle, okay? I really love these beetles because they are so cute. I mean, look at that stinking thing. Look at his little round head and his little spiky hair, and he's just really cute. I hate these beetles because they cause $500 million worth of damage to coffee every year. And it's not easy for them to do that. Coffee beans. Oh, here you can see where what they do to the bean here. Nobody's going to drink that. So coffee beans have one of the deadliest poisons known to the insect world, which is caffeine. Lots of plants make toxins that will kill things. Walnuts, what do they have? Arsenic, and apples have cyanide in them. Coffee has caffeine. Caffeine for humans, if we have a shot of espresso, we're fine. If we have 6 shots of espresso, we're not used to it. We might have heart palpitations and panic attacks. If we have 100 shots of espresso, even if we are used to it, we're going to be dead. Okay, it'll kill us. It's not good for you to drink coffee. Don't drink. I mean, why would you do that? I don't know, but somebody might be considering it. Who knows? So it's really bad. But the coffee berry borer beetle can eat the human equivalent of 500 shots of espresso a day and nothing happens to it. And the reason for that is, you guessed it, it's microbes. They figured this out because they looked at the poop, the frass of a coffee beetle, and they saw that it had no caffeine in it, even though this beetle was eating coffee all day long. So they treated it with antibiotics, and when it started pooping out caffeine because it wasn't able to process it, and then eventually it got sick and died. So they found that there's one bacterium in its stomach that turns caffeine into the nutrients that the beetle needs to survive. But caffeine isn't the only issue that's facing the coffee beetle. And this is where it gets advanced and it gets kind of weird. The coffee beetle also is eating these hard little beans that are packed with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, we break them down into sugars, as you know, but they're really hard to break down. They're big, clunky chemicals that are hard for many creatures to break down. But these beetles have no trouble doing it. So we looked at the beetles, or they looked at the beetles, and they found that there were no bacteria, no microbes at all in its body breaking down these carbohydrates. So then they looked closer at the beetles' genes, and they found that the beetles have a gene called HMAN1. This gene is really great for breaking down carbohydrates, but except for the coffee beetles, it's usually only found in bacteria. And so what they think happened is that the coffee beetles used to have a symbiotic relationship with the bacteria that had this gene to help them break down the coffee, the carbohydrates in the coffee. And over time, the beetles stole the gene from the bacteria, incorporated it in its own genome, and kicked out the middleman, which is totally cold, but it's also adorably cold because it's these beetles. So that's what happened with the coffee berry borer beetle. Now, I want you to remember while we're looking at this that each of these things is something that you can witness and you can interact with on a regular basis, even if you don't see it's happening, because we can't see microbes. But if we learn about them, we can see the incredible things that they're doing in this world all around us all the time. So the next time, you see a fly staggering around with a swollen belly, getting ready to rain terror down on its, fly friends below, I hope that the microbes in your gut will tell you to tip your hat to the microbes in the fly, because it's really wonderful. Okay, Chris, that's all I have. Does anybody have questions, or do you have questions?
I think the folks tuning into this program are definitely going to have some questions. Eleanor, thank you for sharing, first off.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
These stories are wild.
They're wild and they're everywhere. That's the thing that surprised me about the way that this is. Like, people's cats' butts have the microbes in it that control the way the cats smell. And so they go around and poke their butts on everything. I don't know if you have a cat, Chris. I used to, and it just would just put his butt on everything, but it's putting it in the little microbe kisses all over your house. So you know who it is with its butt.
Yeah.
And our dogs, we share microbes with our dogs in our house. Couples who have dogs share more microbes in common than couples who don't have dogs. Like, it really truly exists everywhere around us. In fact, when mothers are gestating their babies, if they have a dog, they give some of their dog's microbes to their babies when they're born that are associated with lower rates of asthma and obesity. I learned that.
It's fascinating.
Yes.
So it brings to mind, and I'm letting folks give our viewers a minute to sort of download everything they've heard, maybe settle their brain after learning some of these wild facts and get their questions in. But people so often are trying to control the microbial world around us as much as we can.
Yeah.
Like cleaning and disinfecting. But it seems like it might not be a great idea. I'm thinking about all of the different roles and jobs that microbes could be playing in our lives.
Right.
So I don't know if that's great. but then also it kind of seems futile. There are so
Yeah.
many of them.
They'll recolonize.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can't really
they
win
will
that.
get us in the end. But, right now, especially this post-COVID world, let's go on and wash our hands. You might as well wash your hands, and other than that, run barefoot, get yourself some diseases, you don't have to be super clean to be okay. In fact, you might be better off not being super clean. There's evidence that shows, you take antibiotics and you get sicker, or you get some sort of infection that comes because you don't have your microbes helping you to process that, or your gut microbes. A lot of times when people take antibiotics, then they have digestive issues after they're, during their round of antibiotics. And that's because you're wiping out the things that are helping you to eat your food. So yeah, we've got to be conscious of what's going on around us at the very least. Think about it before you do it. But I think that we should do that for everything, including swatting bugs in our yards, which there's going to be a lot of that going on right now.
It is the time of year here in North Carolina, sure.
Yes.
For paying a lot of attention to the bugs that are around us.
Yes.
So, okay, tell me a little bit about the book, Unseen Jungle.
Okay.
The illustrations are lovely, by the way.
Oh, it's Rob. He is so wonderful. Rob Wilson, he is an incredible artist. He lives in New York, and he has never drawn a kid's book before, but he spends a lot of time looking at the world and drawing the things that he sees around him. What I love about him with this particular book is that he doesn't really know a whole lot about microbes, just like me when I was starting out the book. So his illustrations end up being so funny to me because it's him taking a guess at what's happening. So there's one where this fungus eats the bottom, like the reproductive organs off of a cicada. And he just draws that by the fungus is like the cicada's looking into his underpants, and he's terrified by what he's seeing down there, because that's what his impressions are, which I love. I feel like art is often can be, if it's done right, can be more real than real life. And that's because it's our impressions of things. And so I think that's so wonderful, the way that he's drawn the book.
And I think it's fascinating. So in pulling the book together, you're an entomologist. I would imagine you were just sort of naturally drawn to like the stories you shared today, all the ways that microbes influence and impact insects and other arthropods. Are there other examples in the book? I mean, like, do people get taken over in this way? Are there?
Yeah, we do. So there are people in there because, they control our whole lives. I mean, like we were talking about at the beginning of the presentation, it talks about, and something I learned in this book that is so beautiful sort of to me is that the minute that you die, your microbiome turns into your necrobiome. And a special suite of microbes starts to take over your body and help you to return your body to the earth, which is really neat to me because a lot of the things can't survive, but we've been carrying these things with us all along. And some of these microbes thrive on that kind of thing. So it's really great. But yes, there's people in the book, there are birds. Microbes help birds control the way that they smell to other birds and how attractive they are to other smells. There's your pets. The book takes you through things that you can find in your house, things you can find in your yard, things that helped you to make your food that you eat every day, and then just some worst case scenarios like rabies. Did you know that possums are less likely to get rabies because their body temperature is too cold? Did you know that?
I don't think I knew it was because of their body temperature.
Because of their body temperature. They can't survive in their bodies. Possums are amazing. They're wonderful.
Yes.
It's also the season for possums around here. So we've got bugs and possums. Yeah.
So there's a question here for you. How did you decide to study entomology?
Oh, I love entomology because first of all, I didn't know about microbes back then. So to me back then, I love the natural world, and you are always surrounded by bugs. So I figured out if you could learn about bugs, you would be learning about the most of animals that you possibly could in one program. So that's why I loved bugs anyway, but that's why I started studying them, because if you know about bugs, you have friends everywhere all the time. Like you go sit outside, I can go on my porch right now and there will be some acrobat ants walking by, and it's thrilling to know what they're doing and to know where they're going or to wonder where they're going, And I imagine it's that way with rock people and plant people. I don't know a lot about rocks and plants, but I would imagine it's just a different thing, a different thrill. But, who knows? I didn't know about microbes at the time, but microbes are basically the current next frontier. So if somebody's wants to learn about something that is literally everywhere, and doing amazing things around them, microbes is the way to go right now, because they're extremely important and they're very prevalent. The only thing about microbes is that you can't see them. Chris, that's what I would say is the downfall to studying microbes. But for bugs, you can see them everywhere, and it's just wonderful. It's my favorite time of year. Crane flies are out in the backyard right now going nuts. It's just wonderful. Have you seen the fireflies yet, Chris?
Yeah, my yard's full of them.
Oh, I have a book.
Those might be my favorite of the beetles.
I was going to show you. Oh, let me make a summer reading recommendation.
Oh,
this book right here, Fireflies, Glowworms, and Lightning Bugs, has in it all the Morse code of the firefly species around you. And you can sit out in your yard and count the code. I found several species, I thought there was just one. There's so many different species of fireflies that can be living in your yard right now. Because over here down to Georgia is some of the biggest biodiversity of fireflies on the planet. And so if anybody is looking for a book recommendation for bugs and you want to be wowed about what's living around you, this time of year, this is the thing. It's written by Lynn Frierson Faust, but it's wonderful. And if for nothing else, just the Morse code of the different species. And you can find them and then you can see what they're doing. Some of them are they're just eating other fireflies. One of them mimics the call of a female firefly of a different species. When the male comes in, she eats it. Then she changes her blink to be the blink of her own species. And they think that she's sequestering his toxins to give to her babies so that spiders don't eat them.
Ooh, fascinating.
Yeah.
See,
that would be in the advanced category.
Like, there's so many wild and crazy stories like that. And I guess I say wild and crazy because they're so different from the experience of being like a person.
Yeah.
In the world.
Thank goodness.
It's very true. But it's been my experience, and I wonder if in bringing this book together, it's been yours, that talking about microbes, even as much as scientists do talk about them, is tricky. Like there's something about talking about microbes, bacteria, and viruses that, I don't know, maybe now that we're out, 3 years out of a major pandemic and everybody's learned a lot about microbes and viruses, the world's a little bit different now. But it seemed to be in my experience that people sort of hear about them a lot, but saying microbes causes people to tune out a little bit.
I would think that that's true. I mean, you say microbes and then that's how I was. I was like, boring. Who cares? I'm like, good for you. If somebody studies microbes, I would think, how nice for you. Next, but the truth is that they're fascinating and they're always up to something. Yes, but you're right. And it's tricky because people are afraid of microbes, just like they're afraid of insects, just like they're afraid of spiders. And as with everything on the planet, whether it's people or microbes or, huge ideas, the more you know about it, the less you're going to be afraid of it, the more you're going to be fascinated by it. And the more you're fascinated by it, the more you're going to learn about it and the more you're going to love it. So just learn about them instead of being afraid of them. And I mean this with people too. I think it's really important to turn, and you have the Fear to Fascination spider exhibit going on at the museum right now. And that's a real thing. That's an important thing. I mean, just think about how much people's days, if I think about how much of my own life I've wasted being scared of spiders instead of loving them, like that's a huge waste. But they're wonderful. So let's learn about them and see what they're doing so we can know how to work with them in the world. Did you have a question?
I've got a few more from the chat if you're ready.
Lay it on me.
All right. Let's see. We've got a few questions from one of our viewers here. Have you discovered any new insect species down in the longleaf pine forests in Southeast Carolina?
I have not discovered any new insect species ever. But I love the longleaf pine savannas in Southeast Carolina, and they are really important for many of our species that we have living in our state. We've got the red cockaded woodpeckers down there. We've got butterflies. You know, incidentally, red cockaded woodpeckers survive on acrobat ants that I was just talking about before. They love those ants because they live in tree holes. But there are so many creatures that are so important to these places like southeastern North Carolina that we need to keep around. But we look at these pine places and we think, oh, it's just a bunch of pine trees. Let's plow them over. But the truth is they're not just a bunch of pine trees. They're harboring some of the richest biodiversity on the planet that is just in our state of North Carolina. Our state is such an incredible place that we should be really proud of to have this stuff. So the answer is no, I have not, but I'm so glad that you at least know that there's, you know, these pine savannas down here, because they're incredible to have. They have several endangered species living there, and I hope that we can keep them around so that other people can see them as well. Do you have another one? Is that too long of an answer?
No, that was perfect. That was lovely. That was fantastic. So they write, science fiction and literature have borrowed some of these concepts that you talked about, like the zombie ant fungus. Do you know of any or have any favorites?
Do I have any favorites? You know, here's the thing.
Science fiction.
It's not just, well, they're the new one, what's it called? The Last of Us. What's the new one with Pedro Pascal?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then a mind controlling fungus. Funguses are very hard for us to kill once they get in our bodies. That was dead on. My favorite thing to do, it's not a microbe thing to see, but is when people use bugs in movies to frighten people, and you come back and look at it later and you're like, oh, those are hissing cockroaches. They can't do anything. My very favorite one is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, when they're going through and they're covered in all of these bugs. All of the bugs that are covering them are like they're all found at the museum in the arthropod zoo. You've got the walking sticks, you've got the little millipedes. They're like the friendliest bugs of all time. Yes, I love it when people take the ideas of the microbes and they take the ideas of these bugs and they use them in movies, especially when you know about what they're doing and like you see why they've chosen the thing they've done. It just makes it so exciting and happy for me, especially Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, because it's the best movie ever.
Excellent. It's got a Harrison Ford fan on the call.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, it's you.
Oh, was it me? Yeah, it is me. And Short Round and all of them.
Well, like I have to agree with you. It's always exciting and funny to see a TV show or a movie or anything like that, or even just to see an illustration, and to be in the position or to have had the experience to learn a little bit about the natural world, to like be able to identify a Madagascar hissing cockroach from, the ones that are crawling across your kitchen floor or something like that. Yeah. So that when you do see them in books and movies and TV, you go, wait a minute, that's not the right thing. So that when Harrison Ford is covered in, walking sticks, you're like, wait a minute, this is just a meet cute. This isn't.
Oh yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. And that's what we do all the time, and that's one of the things that the museum has, is that you take one walk through the museum and you already know enough to watch any commercial where somebody's terrified of this. Why they're terrified of roaches running across their house, and then they've got Madagascan hissing cockroaches or what they're infested with, which is like, why you have bigger problems if this roach is what's living in your house? Like you've got some moisture issues, you've got, who let them go? So yeah, it's wonderful. But the museum is a great place to get started, to get equipped, to fall in love with all of these things and learn about them and then see them out in the world. One thing that drives me crazy is when people put pictures of flies up and say that it's a bee. Like,
Oh, okay.
That drives me nuts. I see it all the time. They take hover flies and they'll put a picture of a fly on a flower and be like, "This is a beautiful bee," but it's not. It's a fly that has stripes like a bee.
We learned all about those just last week from John Gerwin.
Oh, well, he knows.
John Gerwin knows. Everybody, you can go back in the Lunchtime Discovery archive, find John Gerwin's talk. And
did he talk about hoverflies?
Bees, wasps, and their mimics. Yeah.
Oh, he's the one to tell you, man. He knows everything.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, that's a pet peeve of mine.
You're giving all these accolades to the museum, but also you've published 7 books now.
I think
books
so.
Of common ants and spiders and other insects,
spiders and microbes. Yeah,
microbes. You've got Unseen Jungle now with all of these great stories about microbes, but also other things in the natural world, like the insects that you shared with us.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Because I'm really hoping that people will read these things and then they'll start looking for them at their homes. But I will say that I am giving props to the museum. I started as a volunteer at the museum when I was 18 years old, and I'm 42 now. So I have plenty of time to fall in love with that museum. It's such a wonderful place for anybody, and it welcomes everybody who wants to come at any level and learn at anything. This is why I'm doing it. But yes, I do have 8 books, or 7, 8. I don't know. But there's another one in this series coming out in December about the things that your pets do that you don't realize that they're doing. So it's about animal behavior. Like, did you know that your dogs, when you take them out to go to the bathroom, if there are no solar flares outside, they prefer to orient themselves north to south because it's more comfortable for them to go to the bathroom? Did you know that?
I don't know what
That's
it says
important.
about me, but I did know
That's
that.
important information to have. So you see them turning in a circle and then they stop. They usually stop in a north-south direction because they can detect Earth's electromagnetic field. We can't, as far as we know. But cows do that too. Cows like to, this isn't about microbes, sorry. But they do. If you look at pastures full of, herd animals, they can also feel the Earth's electromagnetic field. And they like to orient themselves north to south. Feels good, I guess.
I feel like we got shorted somehow in this evolutionary lottery.
Well, we have thumbs.
Big brains.
We got thumbs.
Some cool stuff too.
We have complicated speech, abstract thought.
We can build a machine to find the electromagnetic field.
Yeah. Well, what superpower would you like from an animal? You could be a microbe and have mind control.
See, that sounds pretty great.
Whose mind would you control, though? I don't want to be inside anybody's mind.
I don't think so. And then you just sort of go like, oh, it'd be great to be able to fly, but
yeah.
But I don't know. I'm doing pretty good down here. I think I'm pretty good. I think I'm pretty good being me.
Might as well stay human. But
might as well.
But for a day or so, you could be a cow and just go north south, or a hammerhead shark. They can do that. We're pigeon.
All right, we're like way over here now.
Sorry.
There's one more question for you. Well, no, there's a question here I wanted to make sure that I got to. How can people get Unseen Jungle?
Oh, well, it's sold most places where books are sold. If they don't have it, and they don't have it at the Barnes & Noble 2 blocks from my house, you can ask them for it and they will buy it for you. But it's also sold on all the major platforms. It's at Quail Ridge if you live in Raleigh. So you can buy it pretty much anywhere. And if you can't buy it, just ask them for it and tell them it's cool so that then they'll carry it. And if you do buy it and you feel like it, you can review it on the internet. Because reviews are helpful, especially if you liked it. All right.
And yeah, especially if you liked it. If you didn't like it, maybe, keep it to yourself.
Yeah. And if you're an educator and you go to Candlewick, which is the publisher's website, they have a bunch of free educational material that you can use that are correlated with next gen science standards. So you can use it for your class. You can just print it off, run it off and throw it to your class. They've got, busy work kind of things like puzzles and coloring sheets, but they've also got experiments that you can do on a very limited budget. There are lots of things that you can do that are free that go along with the book. Even if you don't read the book, you can still use the materials.
Oh, that's fantastic. We actually had some classroom educators on the call today.
Oh, great. Well, maybe they can use this. It's fun for it. We've tried them out on children. They've enjoyed it. So hopefully it'll work. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you shared. Now people know that there's the book and there's some great resources they can take advantage of.
Right. Yeah.
Eleanor, thanks for being here today.
Chris, I'm so glad to be here. I'm glad to see you and the rest of the North Carolina EE people. But thank you for having me. This is really fun.
Great stuff. Viewers, thanks for being here today as well. Glad you all could tune in and be a part of this program. We will be back here next week. We're going to be talking with the museum's head of citizen science, Chris Goforth, about the evolution of environmental education through the pandemic, lessons learned, and then some. So don't miss out. It's going to be great. Chris is fantastic. And we'll see you again next Wednesday at noon for the Lunchtime Discovery Series. Again, thanks to the Office of Environmental Education, the museum's digital media group, and all of you for tuning in. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.
You cancel it.